Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Over the last 3 years, under my leadership, our economy is stronger than ever before, and America has achieved energy independence. These historic accomplishments change our strategic priorities. Your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. It will not be allowed to go forward.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Thursday, January 9th, 2020, and things are back to normal. As normal as we can hope for. There is no war with Iran. Iran made their move and Trump backed down. And I am saying that as a wonderful thing. We're back to normal now that we can make fun of Donald Trump and his unbelievably, that speech, it was just unbelievable. It was a cacophony of slurred speech, Adderall, lies, an abundance of lies, like ISIS is 100% done. No, they're not, but that's fine. We're back to normal. We're back to normal now. We can get away from the madness that Donald Trump brought down upon us after he assassinated Qasem Soleimani, right? And the potential for a much greater war, the potential for we're back to normal as we could hope for it to be. So much so that as soon as Trump's speech was over, it began to trend that the Dutch and Duchess, or whoever they are over there, Meghan Markle and the redhead son, are leaving the royal family. I don't know anything about that over there, right? So I'm trying to piece the whole sentence together, but I only bring it up because that's the headline news now. We don't have to worry about Iran. We don't have to worry about, and again, I'm saying this tongue in cheek, obviously, right? Because our normal is ridiculous. Our normal is quite sad. Our normal is walking this tightrope of anticipating Donald Trump making a unbelievably stupid mistake that could lead us into a nuclear war. That's the new normal. But what we don't want is where we were at the beginning of this week, where the possibility of Donald Trump taking us into an unnecessary war started to look like a reality. So here we are. And now everyone is getting back to normal. You have, and I'm going to play that little clip of Trump again, because now you have Lindsey Graham out here, talking about how magnificent that speech was, and it will be remembered for generations to come. And, and I want to make sure that we're hearing the same speech.
But here's the good news. The president made a very bold decision today to allow things to calm down. This speech will be talked about long after his second term. This is on par with tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev. This is resetting the relationship between the world and Iran, just not the United States. The president said there's an evil empire in Iran that's bent on destroying the world, killing the people in Israel and coming after us, and I will no longer tolerate it. So this is on par with Reagan's tear down this wall speech. Senator, I
have no idea how you can compare. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ronald Reagan is not as brilliant as everyone tries to make him out to be, but I don't know how you compare that to this, Lindsey Graham.
Over the last 3 years, under my leadership, our economy is stronger than ever before, and America has achieved energy independence. These historic accomplishments change our strategic priorities. Your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. It will not be allowed to go forward.
And the new normal, or this normal that we've gotten back to, includes obviously people who are going to say stuff like Lindsey Graham said all over Twitter. Republicans and conservative Trump supporters basically are like, this was a great speech. This was one of the greatest speeches he's ever given. And to me, I had to look in the mirror and check and make sure that my face wasn't slumping down on one side. I had to say my ABCs just to make sure that I was hearing correctly and not having a stroke. That's what it's like to listen to Donald Trump on a regular basis. Now, not all is well on the Republican home front. There happens to be like one Republican who is disappointed in Donald Trump's speech yesterday for very specific reasons. Listen in.
What we were told over and over again was, look, this action was necessary. This was a bad guy. We had to do it. And we can't have division. We can't have dissension within our ranks, within our government, or else it sends the wrong signal to the Iranians. And I think that's completely wrong. They were asked repeatedly, what, if anything, would trigger the need for the administration to come back to Congress for a declaration of war or an authorization for the use of military force. At one point, I believe one of the briefers said something along the lines of, I'm sure we could think of something. But they struggled to identify anything. My point is, they were asked a number of hypotheticals about situations in which they might have to appropriately come and ask for authorization for Congress. Not once did they say, yes, we need to do it in that circumstance. At one point, one of the briefers said something like, don't worry, we'll consult you. Well, with history as our guide, consultation isn't necessarily the same thing as authorization for the use of military force. A declaration of war or an AUMF is what the Constitution requires, and drive-by notification or after-the-fact lame briefings like the one we just received aren't adequate.
So that's Representative Mike Lee. He was standing by, Senator Mike Lee. And he was standing next to Senator Rand Paul. And they were furious. He was particularly furious because of the lack of substance and the lack of justification for the action that Donald Trump took, killing Soleimani. But I do believe that it's safe to say that we're back to normal, where they're not going to do anything. They're going to fall in line. They're going to do what Donald Trump says because that's what they've been doing for the last 3 years. Donald Trump has whipped every single Republican into submission, and they are terrified of standing up and actually doing their jobs. One thing I will give Democrats, I don't believe that they would ever elect somebody as reckless as Donald Trump. Don't get me wrong. We always elect people who maintain this American empire, this capitalistic system. None of that ever changes. This military industrial complex, none of that ever changes. But the Democrats would never elect somebody as reckless as Donald Trump. And if they turn out to be reckless, Democrats would love to demonstrate to America that they are above political partisan posturing and that they would impeach and remove that president. Republicans have capitulated in every way imaginable. So while I hear Senator Mike Lee, I hear his frustration and I agree with the sentiment of it. And it's absolutely the exact thing that we need lawmakers to be asking about. Those are the questions that matter. Was there any justification? Is there any evidence? Is there anything to substantiate this? Why are you informing us after the fact? Why wasn't this asked beforehand? Why is the president overextending the use of military force that he's had since 2003? Well, the answer to that question is because every president has extended the use of that last authorization of use of military force. And the other answer is because no lawmaker actually wants to go on the record about war in the first place. But I will give him that those are the accurate questions, Senator Lee. The question now is, what the hell are you going to do about it? Or are you going to go back to normal and just fall in line and capitulate to Donald Trump? My money is that you're going to do what Republicans have done. You have genuflected. You have prostrated yourself before this president, and you will not do anything whatsoever because you are terrified of his political power. And the reason you should be terrified, quite frankly, of his political power is because Republicans have been pushed into this hyper-partisan space where they will support anything that Donald Trump does because he is the full actualization of everything that they have been trying to be for 40 years. And that is because, remember the story, guys? Let me shift really quickly. Remember the story that I talked about last week about Ben Shapiro and how you can't pretend, you can't tease your audience with bigotry because the real bigots will come along. It's the same exact thing. The Republican Party has been dog whistling. They have been dog whistling for 40 years or more, actually probably 50 years. They have been using the Southern strategy. They have been using all of these techniques to try to simultaneously be a respected party that capitalizes on the racist, bigoted vein that remains in this country. And it took about 45, 50 years for Donald Trump to see that this was his opportunity. And he rose to the occasion and gave the Republican base what they had been salivating over. They had just been, you can't tease. Can you imagine the anticipation? 40 years of teasing. And then finally, here comes somebody who's going to give it to you the exact way that you want it. Republican lawmakers should be terrified because they have created a monster in their own constituency that is now eating them alive. They are not going to hear reason. They are not going to be reasonable. They want Donald Trump, the majority of Republicans. And that is the new normal. So I fully do not expect anything from the Republican Party, no matter what Donald Trump does, because Donald Trump has demonstrated, and the Republicans have demonstrated, that they are so far gone beyond any sense of reason, any sense of rationality, that anything Donald Trump does, no matter how, honestly, they tried to explain away this conflict with Iran as the next necessary step to the second coming of Christ. In other words, they're willing to see the end of the world. Get this. Instead of confronting the madness of Donald Trump, the irresponsibleness, the recklessness of Donald Trump, instead of addressing that, they would embrace the end of the world. Can I say that one more time? Not for dramatic effect, because it's just dawning on me. Instead of holding Donald Trump accountable, they would rather say, no, this is right, because this means Jesus is coming back. The Republican Party is a death cult, and Donald Trump is their dear leader.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Come on. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for our patron party. I have to give a very, very special welcome to a gentleman that I missed yesterday, Demetrius Hicks. Demetrius, thank you so much, my friend, for becoming a patron. Now, I've got a long list of people who heard what I asked yesterday and they jumped on it. And I hope that I do not miss anybody, because there was quite a few people who took us up on the offer of increasing their pledges just by $1. And that is making all the difference. So let's get started. I'm going to do it without the music. Actually, no, maybe I'll bring the music back in after I record it. So if you hear music right now, that means that, anyway, you get it. Very special welcome to very special thank you to Joel Smith for increasing your pledge. Very special thank you to Shelby Reichart Hall. Thank you for increasing your pledge. Very special thank you to TY711. Thank you for increasing your pledge. Rhonda Gomez increased her pledge. Nasama. And they all, to a greater or lesser extent, increased their pledge by $1. Some increased it by $3. Some increased it by $5. But yeah, for the most part, everyone increased it just by $1, and that's making a difference. Nasama, thank you for increasing your pledge. Jared, thank you for increasing your pledge. Kristen Shaw, thank you for increasing your pledge. Duncan Secor, thank you for increasing your pledge. And very special welcome to Calvin Williams. Thank you for becoming a patron. Your first time, I believe, being a patron, so thank you so much for that. Everyone listening, you too can become a patron by going to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show. I'm looking at the gear, the equipment that I purchased. It's on my desk right now. It's actually underneath my hands. The gear that we're going to use to live stream. I couldn't wait until we got to 500 patrons because, I just get excited and kind of move faster than my deadlines because I really want to get these live shows back going, and because I'm partnering with United States Democratic Socialists from Facebook and Instagram. They have very large audiences that are waiting for some content. And so, all of you who are listening to the Benjamin Dixon Show, you get the benefit of all of our wonderful patrons who helped get us to this point, as well as just kind of serendipity. So we'll have live shows coming back very soon, video content coming back very soon, and that's that. Okay, let's move on to the next story. Lindsey Graham. If there ever was a time that Lindsey Graham is in trouble, it is right now. He has a Democratic challenger by the name of Jamie Harrison, and over the last 3 months, he has raised $3.5 million to compete with Lindsey Graham. Now, there are some disadvantages that money can't overtake. And it's incumbency, right? I mean, it takes a whole lot of money to overcome incumbency, but two, it is also the electorate and their disposition towards people of color. Jamie Harrison is black. And in South Carolina is a tough state. That's all I can say. It's a very tough state, and they have been supportive of. But listen, $3.5 million in 3 months might be the money necessary to overcome that pattern. Might be necessary to overcome the stranglehold that Lindsey Graham and the Republican Party have over the state of South Carolina. Now, this really just goes back to the conversation that we've been having for quite some time. That's an obscene amount of money to run any election, in my opinion. But I get it. You have to hire people. You have to hire staff. People have to get paid. No one is going to work for free, or very few people will work for free on a major project like running for senator. But it's just the hurdle, the threshold to even become a viable candidate. Really, our system has really structured it so that if you're not influential already, if you're not well connected and well networked, like if you don't run in money, if you don't run with people with money, then you really will never have a chance of getting this far. So I'm going to I don't know much about Jamie Harrison, but I can tell you that he's well connected. I can tell you that he runs in circles that have a lot of money, because that's the only way he got to the point where he hit critical mass. And critical mass is basically where the money just starts coming in, where you don't have to start, calling 7 and 10 hours a day. You could just stay to your standard 4 hours a day that you're calling people, asking them for money. And I do believe I saw an article where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to go down and campaign with Jamie to try to help him defeat Lindsey Graham. And this is a necessity. Lindsey Graham, along with every other Republican, has to go. David Perdue here in Georgia is a Republican senator. Johnny Isakson has already resigned, and there's a big competition going on over there. On that side of the aisle in terms of Republican senators here in the state of Georgia. I mean, in Mississippi, which is the other story that I wanted to go over, there is a very strong possibility that Mississippi will have its first black senator. And Republicans aren't taking it too well. The reason before I go to Mississippi, the reason I was really slow to talk about the racial component of the South, it's because I live in the South. I grew up in the South, and the South is a pretty good place to be. Right. But let's just be real. There's some thresholds there's some accomplishments that we have not crossed. We have not crossed. There's not been an elected black senator from the state of Georgia. There's not been an elected black senator from the state of Mississippi. And Jamie Harrison in South Carolina is going to have a run for his money to try to beat Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. But it is what it is. It is a reality that is going to require a large sum of money to overcome. And it looks like it might actually. Well, with $3.5 million, he's got a chance. Now, back to Mississippi. Mike Espy is the black senator or black candidate who's running for Senate. And the current governor of Mississippi said this. He said that if the state of Mississippi elects Mike Espy, And he did couch the sentence in trying to just kind of flatten it out and make it seem like he was talking about Democrats in general. So he said if Mississippi elects Democrats and Mike Espy to the Senate, then it would be the beginning of 1,000 years of darkness. Okay, so I want to repeat that again. He said if you elect this black man to be the senator from the state of Mississippi, who's a Democrat, because he's going to say, obviously, when they explain this away, they're going to say, well, we're talking about the policies of Democrats. We're talking about the politics and the policies and the positions of Democrats. We had nothing to say about his blackness except the fact that you believe that he's going to lead you into 1,000 years of darkness. The irony is, of course, historically, there was 1,000 years of darkness that came down on the world, and it was when the Crusaders crushed the golden era of Islam. But that's a whole different conversation. But that's the of course, the contradictory language, right? These are the same people who believe that Donald Trump starting the war with Iran was the second coming of Christ. So, how can there be? We're not even going to be here in 1,000 years, according to your theology. According to Republicans who supported the attack, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, according to you, Jesus is going to come back soon. But that the inconsistencies mean absolutely nothing to them. They firmly believe that if you elect a black man or Democrat to the Senate in Mississippi, from the state of Mississippi, that it's going to create 1,000 years of darkness. But don't worry, Jesus is going to come back in the next few years if Donald Trump goes ahead and starts war with Iran. This is what we're dealing with, folks. We're not dealing with rational actors. We're not dealing with reasonable people. And that's all the more reason why, unfortunately, we have to raise a lot of money. We have to make these phone calls. You have to make these donations, these small dollar donations, whatever we have to do to get these people out of office, because we're dealing with a death cult that will be the destruction not only of America, but also of this planet. Okay. Okay. Let's get back to some presidential politics. We haven't been able to cover that because of the urgency of what was happening in Iran. Bernie Sanders just received the endorsement of the environmentalist organization Sunrise Movement, which is a major endorsement. And it really speaks to, it can speak to whatever you feel like it speaks to. I think it's a great endorsement to have. Also, in between the time Donald Trump struck and killed Qasem Soleimani and almost took us to war, Julian Castro dropped out of the race. That's old news. Yes. And then the next day he endorsed Elizabeth Warren. That's still pretty old news in terms of the news cycle. Yesterday, he went on the campaign trail with Elizabeth Warren, and that's pretty recent. On the campaign trail, they, hey, they're doing their thing the way they want to do it. And this is what I'm talking about. Elizabeth Warren is really doubling, tripling down on these selfies. And now they're talking about, because Julian Castro is on the campaign trail with her, that they're going to do a double selfie line. And here's what I want to say about this. Of course, everyone is like, oh, this is ridiculous. This is silly. This isn't what politics is about. Blah, 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 blah. I get it. I like people with substance, and Elizabeth Warren certainly has substance. I like people who put substance out front. Well, Elizabeth Warren has put substance out front, but she's pivoting to this really soft touch kind of approach. And this is why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because I don't know if you guys realize how much that matters to people. That interaction. And then maybe it's something that she could just do and not talk about. Maybe that will make everybody feel better. But let me tell you, man, those personal moments mean a whole lot. Those people will never forget it. Those people are going to go and find 10 other people to vote for her. So let's not poo-poo on the very human caring, my wife's over there laughing at me. I'm just saying, like, let's don't shit on the very human loving touch that goes into those moments. And I could tell you, Elizabeth Warren takes her time to reach out to people. Well, I can't tell you, but I would tell you that she extends a level of love and compassion that I want to thank her for. And when I tell you that stuff matters, it matters tremendously. It is quite honestly something that Bernie Sanders can learn from. If Bernie Sanders had that caring touch, the same touch that I try to give, right? It's just me. I'm corny like Elizabeth Warren in that way. I'm not going to be on stage talking about all the selfies I took, right? I do take my politics as hand-to-hand combat, right? I get it. But when it comes to personal interactions with people and those moments of thoughtfulness, you know, the reason I say, I'm sure Bernie Sanders does that, but the reason I say he can learn from that is because that's not what's put on display with Bernie Sanders. And that's really one of the things that people are trying to hold against him. He's this old, bitter, stubborn man. Well, he is old. He is bitter. He is stubborn. You know, he's bitter with the military industrial complex. He's bitter with what capitalism has done. But as much as we want to have nothing but policy, the reality of it is that this is a contest of winning the affection of millions of people. And so I think that, you know, the selfie thing, I think we think it's corny, but there are 100,000 people who have now had a personal interaction with Elizabeth Warren that they would never forget. And those 100,000 people will go out and work to get 10 more people. And depending on where that pool of mushroomed, that snowballed effect of voters, depending on what state that's in, that could help. Every little thing helps. Never neglect anything, especially just because you think it's corny. Somebody thinks it was magnificent. 100,000 somebodies think that it was magnificent. And when Elizabeth Warren thinks and remembers people and sends them personal messages to check on them, that resonates with everyone. So anyway, I just thought that we should drop that there. In terms of everything else, we still have to beat Joe Biden. Pete Buttigieg is still in the game, trying to reposition himself as the commander in chief, and there for the war that didn't happen. It's hilarious. He changed his Avi rather from on Twitter, from that, 40-year-old virgin yellow background where he was looking off inspired to this really hardcore looking, commander in chief in a serious suit. And the war never happened. Thankfully, the war never happened. Joe Biden is still out on the campaign trail lying, saying that he didn't support the Iraqi war. And of course, he was one of the main supporters of the war. And the media is still not questioning him about it. So like I said at the beginning of the show, we're getting back to normal. Thankfully, we're getting back to the regular madness that is the American political experience. That's it for today, everyone. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.